My dad said, "You'll never be as good as your brother," while I was paying their bills for 7 years. I just stared at my plate while the whole table laughed. They had no idea I'd covered thousands in rent, groceries, and car repairs. That night, I said nothing, but I started a binder, and once I opened it at the kitchen table, everything changed. I've always been the responsible one. Max, the fixer, the quiet older brother who never made trouble, who always showed up. You know the type. I was the one who helped Mom when she got sick, who loaned Dad money after the second layoff, who drove Cole to his freshman orientation because everyone else was busy. I didn't mind it. Not really. I told myself that's what family does. You show up. You help. But that night, at the dinner table, something broke in me. It was a regular Sunday dinner, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, the usual stories. Cole was talking about his new job, some sales gig he landed through a friend of a friend. Everyone was laughing, raising their glasses to him like he'd cured cancer. And then Dad looked at me, smirked, and said, "You'll never be as good as your brother." The table erupted in laughter like it was the funniest thing ever said, like I wasn't sitting right there. I didn't laugh. I didn't say a word. I just stared at my plate and felt something I couldn't explain, like the floor had tilted under me and everything I'd done for them meant nothing. No one noticed my silence, or if they did, they didn't care. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the joke, not even the sting of the words, but the casual way they brushed me off, like my entire identity had been reduced to a punchline, like I was background noise in my own family. Later that night, I stood in my bathroom brushing my teeth and stared at myself in the mirror. I tried to remember the last time anyone had thanked me, not for the big things, just for anything. Picking up groceries, helping with bills, babysitting when no one else would. I couldn't think of a single time. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't confront anyone or storm out. That's not who I am. But something in me shifted. A quiet, deep shift. I started reevaluating, not in a bitter way. Not yet. Just carefully, like you'd inspect a broken pipe to see where the leak started. Because something was leaking, and I was the only one drowning. I replayed that dinner conversation in my head on loop for days. At work, on the train, lying in bed. I realized it wasn't just one comment. It was a pattern. A family system where Cole was the golden son, loud, charming, effortlessly adored. And me? I was the utility, the support beam. Useful, but not seen. And I couldn't stop asking myself, how did I let this happen? How did I become invisible in a family I've sacrificed so much for? That question sat with me, heavy as a boulder, and I didn't have an answer, but I was ready to find one. It started small, 100 here, 50 there. Just until Friday. Just this once. I was 21 the first time my mom asked if I could cover a utility bill. "We're a little short this month," she said. I had just started my first full-time job, still living with roommates, still eating ramen and dollar pizza, but I said yes. Of course I said yes. Then came the medical copay, then the car repair, then a missed rent check for Cole, who'd forgotten his wallet on spring break and needed a last-minute Venmo. I started keeping track in my head, but it got too messy. So I stopped. They never asked if I could afford it. They assumed I could. And maybe I played into that. I didn't have kids. I wasn't married. I had a steady job. That made me the one who's doing well. Eventually, I became their emergency fund. Quietly. Automatically. Unspoken. Like a family rule no one remembers making. If someone needed something, they went to me. I didn't realize how deep it ran until after that dinner. I sat down one night with my laptop and started going through my banking history. Just for curiosity. Just to see. I pulled every transfer, every ATM withdrawal labeled family, mom, Cole, or just help. I logged them in a spreadsheet line by line until the numbers blurred. The total? $28,940. That didn't include groceries I picked up, gas I paid for, or the hours I spent moving furniture, fixing sinks, setting up routers, babysitting my nephew when Cole couldn't be bothered. $28,940. Gone. Unacknowledged. Forgotten. I stared at the number until my eyes hurt. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. But seeing it laid out like that, it was like I'd been tricked into donating my life to a cause that didn't even know my name. And I didn't feel proud, or generous, or even angry. I just felt used. I realized then this wasn't a phase. This wasn't some temporary period where I stepped up until things got better. This was the system. I had been cast in a role, and not a flattering one. Not the hero, not the cherished older brother, the dependable one, which in our family meant the one they could bleed without guilt. That night, I bought a binder. I started printing out statements, screenshots, copies of Venmo receipts. I made sections. I wrote dates. I even added little post-it notes with reminders like Mom's ER visit or Cole's busted iPhone. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, about no longer gaslighting myself into thinking I was exaggerating or just helping out. I needed to see it, to hold the weight of it in my hands, to finally call it what it was. I wasn't being generous. I was being drained, and I wasn't even sure they knew they were doing it. But I was starting to understand that didn't make it okay. 3 weeks after the dinner, I got a group text. Mom, hey boys, quick meeting Sunday before dinner, family finances. Cole replied with a thumbs up. I didn't say anything. When I walked into the house that evening, Dad was already seated at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. Mom had a printout from some budgeting website. Cole was drinking a beer, already too relaxed. I sat down without a word and placed the binder on the table. Mom raised her eyebrows. What's that? You'll see, I said. Dad cleared his throat and began. So, we've been talking, and with the way things are going these days, we thought it would be fair if both you boys chipped in a little more regularly. Nothing crazy, just a monthly contribution to keep the house running smooth. Cole nodded. Makes sense. I opened the binder, turned it toward them. Page 1. My summary. I've already contributed, I said quietly. They looked at me confused, so I flipped the first page. Then the next, then the next. Line by line, I walked them through it. March 2018, $250 for Mom's dental work. July 2019, $600 for Cole's rent. November 2020, $100 for Dad's car repairs. This is all itemized. Cole scoffed. You kept receipts? Yes, I said. Not at first, but after a while I had to. Mom leaned back, arms crossed. Max, come on. You make good money. We're family. You never said it was a problem. And you never said thank you, I replied, still calm. Dad shook his head. We never asked for that much. You're exaggerating. I reached into the binder and pulled out the receipts, dates, notes, Venmo screenshots. We never received a single dollar from you, Mom said flatly. That's when I knew. This wasn't denial. This was erasure. They weren't just pretending it wasn't a big deal. They were rewriting history. They were deleting me. I felt something rise in me. Not rage, not even sadness, just a cold, clear resolve. You don't get to gaslight me, I said, voice steady. I'm not angry. I'm just done. Cole rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. So what? You want us to pay you back? I shook my head. No. I want boundaries. I took a breath. I will no longer be making automatic contributions. I will not cover emergencies. I will not be the default. I'm happy to help if it's discussed respectfully, but I'm not a wallet. I'm your son. No one spoke. The room felt like static. I'm not asking for gratitude, I continued, but I won't keep playing a role that only works if I disappear into it. I closed the binder, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just the background anymore. I had made myself visible, even if they didn't like what they saw. 2 days later, the spin cycle began. First, it was the texts from Mom, soft, sugary guilt wrapped in passive aggression. I'm sorry if you feel unappreciated. You know we've always loved you the same. You seemed fine with it all these years. Then came Dad's classic line. This isn't how families behave, Max. By Thursday, Aunt Rita was involved. She called me out of nowhere, asking why I was causing drama and hurting your mother's heart. I hadn't spoken to her in months. She said she saw a post on Facebook. Mom had shared a vague paragraph about being betrayed by someone you raised. I didn't respond. I scrolled down and saw the comments. All her church friends offering prayers, hugs, affirmations of what a strong woman she was. It was surreal. They were building a story, and I was the villain. The cold, selfish, ungrateful son who'd turned his back on the family after all they'd done for me. Then Cole sent a Venmo request, $280, labeled, "You're half of the family dog's surgery." We never had a dog. I stared at it for a full 5 minutes, then declined it. Quietly. No explanation, no sarcasm. Just no. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. This was about power, about keeping me in my role, about shaming me for stepping out of line. The hardest part wasn't their anger. It was the silence from the ones who knew better. My cousin Jenna had once confided that she thought Mom took advantage of me. My uncle once praised me for carrying more than your share. But now, crickets. No one wanted to be next in the crosshairs. So they stayed quiet. And I stayed quiet too. But not because I felt shame. I was choosing silence for a different reason. Because when you stop playing the role they wrote for you, your silence becomes power. That week, I canceled every automatic payment I had set up for them. The grocery delivery, the utilities I'd been covering for years. I called the insurance company and removed myself from the policy I had quietly paid on their behalf. I opened a new savings account and named it Reclaim. Every dollar I used to give to them went there now. Not to punish them, not to hoard money, but because I needed to rebuild. Not my bank account. Myself. Because when a family builds itself on your self-erasure, reclaiming your space will always feel like violence to them. But it's the only way to survive. Learning to say no without apology felt like learning a foreign language. I started small. I let calls go to voicemail. I didn't respond to guilt-laced texts. I said no to a last-minute family dinner invitation with no explanation other than, "Can't make it." The first time I actually typed out no and sent it, just that one word, I stared at the screen for 10 minutes afterward, waiting for lightning to strike. It didn't. Instead, I felt relief. Like an entire weight I didn't know I was carrying finally slid off my shoulders. I started running again. Not fast, not far. Just a few blocks around the neighborhood in the cool morning air. It wasn't about fitness. It was about breathing. About claiming space that wasn't about anyone else's crisis. I started therapy. I told the truth for the first time out loud, to someone who wasn't trying to twist it into guilt or shame. My therapist didn't flinch when I said, "I think my family only values me when I'm useful." She just nodded and said, "Let's sit with that." And I did. Meanwhile, the pressure didn't stop. Mom would text vague Bible verses about humility and kindness. Dad sent a screenshot of an article about duty to aging parents. Cole left a voicemail saying, "Wow, guess you're too good for us now, huh?" But I didn't take the bait, even when one of Dad's old coworkers' wives somehow got my number and called me selfish for not helping my own parents. Apparently, Mom had started expanding the audience. I kept saying, "No. No, I will not send money. No, I will not explain myself in a 10-paragraph text. No, I will not show up to pretend everything's fine." And every no made room for something new. I started cooking pancakes on Sundays. A small ritual just for me. I'd never realized how much I associated Sundays with service, with showing up to carry something. Now they were quiet. Mine. I reconnected with a friend I hadn't seen in 2 years. She said, "You look lighter." And I did. Not because the pain was gone, but because it finally had somewhere to go. The hardest part was letting go of the fantasy, the one where they suddenly woke up and realized how much I'd given, how much I'd carried. The fantasy where they said sorry. That fantasy died quietly one night while I watched a movie alone and caught myself thinking, I wonder if they miss me yet. And then I realized I wasn't doing this to be missed. I was doing this to finally see myself. And for once, that was enough. Grief doesn't always show up in black clothes and sad music. Sometimes it looks like scrolling through old photos and realizing you were never really in them. Not the way you thought. You were the one behind the camera, the driver, the helper. Always there, but always slightly out of frame. I started to feel the ache of that invisibility more clearly the longer I stayed away. They didn't stop trying. Mom posted on Facebook again, something about sons who abandon their roots. Dad accidentally sent a group email asking for help fixing the fence, then followed up with, "Oh, didn't mean to include you." Cole texted, "Don't worry, we've learned not to count on you." It stung. Not because I wanted to be their savior again, but because I still wanted to be their son. That's what hurt the most. You can stop participating in a toxic system. You can even grow beyond it. But it doesn't mean you don't miss the parts that felt real. The nights on the porch with Dad helping Mom bake banana bread, Cole calling me Maxie when he was drunk and sentimental. But grief doesn't mean regret. And boundaries don't mean bitterness. I kept showing up for myself. Therapy every Wednesday, pancakes on Sundays, long walks with no destination. My savings account, Reclaim, was slowly growing. I'd never had one like that before. A safety net just for me. Then one afternoon, I got the final jab I didn't know I'd been waiting for. Cole sent a voice memo. "You always had this complex," he said. "Like you needed to be the hero. Like none of us could survive without St. Max. Newsflash. We're fine." I listened to it 3 times. It didn't make me angry. It made everything clear. He had no idea why I stepped up all those years. No idea what it cost me. And worse, he didn't care. Not really. He wanted a version of me that stayed quiet, paid up, and never asked for anything in return. I opened the voice memo app and recorded one line. "I didn't want to be your hero. I just wanted to be his son." Then I deleted the thread. That was the last time I replied. It didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt honest. And after years of being rewritten, erased, and used, honesty was the most powerful thing I had left. I don't check my banking app after 9 p.m. anymore. It's a rule I made up for myself one night when I caught myself staring at the Reclaim balance, trying to make it mean something, trying to make it feel like proof that walking away was worth it. But numbers don't fix grief. They don't erase what never was. So now after 9, I log off. I make tea. I read. I rest. I remind myself, I didn't leave to be richer. I left to be real. The texts still come sometimes. Not as often. Mostly from Mom. Little pings of revisionist history. "Hope you're well. We miss you. Dad says he'd love to see you. Can't believe it's been this long. Not once has anyone said the words I needed. We're sorry. We see you now. And maybe they never will. But that's not the point anymore. I started running 5 days a week. Sometimes I make it 2 miles. Sometimes 6. It's not about speed. It's about motion. I'm not stuck anymore. I cook real meals. For myself. I set the table, even if it's just me. I got a raise last month. No one in my family knows. No one asked. And that used to hurt. But now, it just is. I'm not the background anymore. Not the fixer. Not the ghost that keeps the lights on. I'm Max. And I'm building a life where I don't need to be everything to everyone to feel like someone. Some nights I still feel the ache. I still think about Thanksgiving, about Christmas, about the empty space where a family should be. But I also think about what I've created in that space. Silence, peace, freedom. They still try here and there, a message, a half invitation, a reminder of the version of me they wish I still was. But I don't rescue anymore. I don't explain. I don't rehearse speeches that no one will hear. I live my new story now, one where love isn't a currency, one where I don't need to disappear to feel worthy, one where I'm allowed to say no and rest and matter without having to earn it. And that quiet, that's not loneliness. That's me. Finally being heard, even if I'm the only one listening.